Hello, church family. Um, it's really good to be able to send you guys out a message tonight on this beautiful snowy evening. Uh, I really wanted to take this time, one, to thank you all for your prayers, and thank you so much for just allowing me time to heal. And I really wanted to take this time to share with you all what happened to me and share with you guys just what I've learned in this whole situation that I found myself in. So uh, I hope that this will be informative and beneficial, and I hope encouraging, especially if there are people that um, perhaps have been in a situation like mine um, and just need encouragement to see the big picture. So I'll share with you guys. We're on Wednesday now, so 3 weeks ago, it was a Monday. That previous weekend, I got up on Saturday, played soccer, felt good. Came preached on Sunday. If you guys can remember that far back, we covered the first part of John. Monday morning, I started work, felt fine, and ate lunch that day and started working. About 2 hours later, so I guess this is about 1 o'clock, I just started to feel just sick to my stomach. Started just to have some cramps. I figured that I just, whatever reason, what I'd eaten for lunch wasn't settling with me well. Just as the day kept going on, I had planned that night to do sermon prep, and by Monday night, I was feeling pretty miserable. I was not hungry. I totally had lost any appetite, and I was trying to treat my stomach with just a heating pad, just seeing if I could somehow get the pain to stop, and ended up pain just kept getting worse and worse. I ended up throwing up twice that night. And I thought, like, after throwing up, I thought, okay, that's it. I'm fine now. I'm gonna be fine. I ejected whatever was in my system that my body clearly did not like. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. That night, I had horrible time sleeping because I was just in so much pain. And so I was up most of the night and then still had to get up at 6 a.m. to start work. And I started working, worked for the first part of the morning, and my pain was getting so much worse. And so I was actually in the middle of taking a test for work, and I couldn't even concentrate on the test because I was hurting so much. So I hate going to the doctor. I really do. I don't know why. I just have an incredible aversion to it. And so I have to be really, really sick before I'll go to the doctor. And at this point, I was in so much pain that I was like, this isn't passing. Whatever's going on, I'm not sure about, but I'm not getting better, and I feel like I'm just continually getting worse. So I told Melissa, I messaged my boss and told Melissa, said, I think I need to go to the doctor. This was about uh, 11:30, 12 o'clock, something like that on Tuesday. And so we went to our regular doctor's office and saw the doctor there. And I mean, at this point, like, even walking was hurting me really, really bad. So we get into the doctor's office, and of course, they want to check. I mean, even though I didn't feel like I had any symptoms of COVID, they just wanted to check about COVID and the flu. And so they go ahead, they do those swabs, and they said, okay, this is the quick test. We'll be back soon. Well, needless to say, I was in so much pain at the doctor's office. I ended up, I remember because it took them over an hour to come back. And Melissa, in fact, she ended up going and asking the nurse as to why it was taking so long. And I remember it hurt to even sit on my bottom. And so when the doctor walks in, I'm hunched over a chair on my knees on the floor of the doctor's office, just trying to endure the waves of pain that I'm having. So the doctor comes in, get on the bed, she kind of pushes on my stomach, asks me different questions about family history and things like that, different histories that I might have, which of course I didn't have any. And so she ends up, after I tell her that I have a history of diverticulitis in my family, she says, well, you have all the symptoms of diverticulitis, but I couldn't be sure without running some tests. So she said, what I'll do is I'm just going to put you on antibiotics, and if you get worse, just come back. So it was just that, and then we were done. So we go back out to the car. I come home, and I just get in bed. I mean, I felt the worst I've ever felt. As far as feeling just normal sickness as I thought it was. So I come home and just intermittently sleep pretty much the rest of that day. Oh yeah, one of the other things that she had talked about was about me cleaning out my system. She said that I could be constipated, and I'd never struggled with those kinds of things, never experienced that, and so I pretty quickly realized that that wasn't what I was struggling with. And so I intermittently slept for the rest of that day. Melissa had to go because we were involved in a play. And so Melissa had to go to play practice that night. And I would intermittently sleep, and my head was hurting so bad. Kept checking my temperature, and just over the evening, my temperature was just rising, rising, rising. And so finally, I ended up waking up around 10 p.m. Melissa still wasn't home, so I called her up and just asked her, where she was, if she was coming home soon. And I just told her, I said, I really think I'm getting worse. Like, I know the doctor said to come back. And she was like, well, I can take you to the ER. And I mean, I dread going to the normal doctor. Going to the ER is like a nightmare for me. And all I could think is that, right now it's 10 o'clock at night. Um, Melissa's going to have to get up at 6 a.m. to get the kids ready for school. I'm going to have to get up at 6 a.m. for work. I mean, going to the ER, but I was feeling so sick, and I was in so much pain. So finally, I conceded and I said, "Yeah, I think that I need to go to the ER." Uh, and so the pain had gotten so bad I was experiencing it in my lower abdomen, and the pain had gotten so bad I couldn't even sit up out of bed um, to even go to the doctor. I ended up having to have Logan pick me up because I couldn't lift myself up without being in agony. So Logan ended up helping me get into the car. Melissa and we head off to the ER. And we get to the ER and we park. And I mean, like, I'm walking slower than a snail. So thankfully, we get into the ER and they immediately give me a wheelchair, which I'm so thankful for. Um, and at first, I didn't think that they were even going to allow Melissa in with me because she hadn't been tested for COVID. And so thankfully, they did allow her in. So we get into the initial part of the ER. They want to know, the nurses there wanted to know just what my symptoms were. Um, and and right off the bat, I mean, they warn us. They're like, it's a really long wait tonight. And so we just wanted to say sorry. It's gotten better than what it was, but it's still really, really backed up. And so I'm just like, this is not happening. Like, this is so bad. So we go into I guess the triage is what they call it, where, they initially take your temperature and your vitals, all of those kinds of things. Um, so they do all of that, and then they wheel Melissa and I off into the regular ER waiting room, and it's packed. It really is. Melissa was going to edit photos that night. So the only place that we found to sit didn't even have chairs, and it was in between, because they put up all of these chairs pretty much, but um, it was in between the vending machines. And so she's sitting on the floor, I'm in the wheelchair. Well, about 5 minutes go by, Melissa just gets her computer out, and the nurse who had done all of the initial vital stuff comes back out, and she lets us know that the doctor wants to perform an EKG on me. And so Melissa was like, well, do I need to come in there? And she said, no, it's really fast. I'll only take, just a few minutes. So they wheel me back into the triage. I put all the little nodes on my chest, do the EKG. It takes about 5 minutes. They wheel me back out into the ER, and I can't even really remember, but very well. But it was a really, really short time, maybe 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, I hear my name being called to come back. And this already kind of freaks Melissa and I out a little bit, mainly because they told us it was going to be a long wait, and we just bypassed everybody. So we're going back, walking with the nurse. I remember Melissa asking, like, I mean, is this something that, like, we need to be concerned about? And of course, the nurse is just consoling us. No, nothing that you need to worry about. She said simply just that with his having high blood pressure, his heart rate being really high, and having a fever, the doctor just wants him to be monitored immediately. So they put us into a room, and all of a sudden, the nurse was pretty much immediately in, and started taking information, and I mean, like, getting me all plugged up and everything, and probably within 5 minutes the ER doctor's in there. I've never seen a doctor this fast. So the ER doctor comes in, and he just starts asking me what happened, and I just shared with him the whole story, going to the doctor, what the doctor said, and he seemed so perturbed that this doctor sent me home. I mean, it's really, really hard to capture how annoyed he seemed about the whole thing. So he goes and he starts his examination on me, and presses on some areas, moves my leg around, which I didn't understand, hits me in the bottom of the leg, which I didn't understand. But anyways, he checks me out. He ends up telling me that he's pretty confident that I have appendicitis, and ends up letting me know that uh, if my appendix hasn't burst, they'll do the surgery in the morning. If it has burst, they'll immediately do the surgery. And so the appendicitis thing just made more sense to me, because I had never struggled with any of, having symptoms of diverticulitis or anything like that. And so I thought, okay, sure. By this point, I ended up getting morphine, which was a blessed relief from the pain that I was in. So the doctor ends up telling me, he said, we'll know for sure once we do the CT scan. So they finished getting all of their vitals, blood drawn, everything, and they cart me off to go do the CT scan, come back, and about, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 minutes later, I mean, you got to bear with me the fact that I was kind of looped out on morphine, so my ability to tell time at this point wasn't all that great. But so the doctor comes back and lets me know that my appendix was fine, and that a surgeon would be in to come see me. So I don't know what happened or when it happened, but eventually, at one point in the night, a surgeon ended up coming in and letting us know that I did indeed have diverticulitis with what they called a perforated colon. So, he ends up telling me that it's a really, really common thing. Diverticulitis is very common, and perforations in the colon is a very common thing. He said, Lots of people get them. They get these little pinholes. That's just really how big they are. Little teeny, like, I mean, if you can think about sticking a thumbtack or a needle into, the barriers of your colon. Uh, and most people just produce a natural enzyme um, that heals that up, and so most people never even notice what happens to them. But he told me that, with the diverticulitis, they were going to put me on rounds of antibiotics. They were admitting me to the hospital, and that was that. So in the morning, I end up meeting the surgeon who I was actually going to be put under. And so she explains to me, just again reiterating what the surgeon had told me the previous night, why I was feeling the pain, where I was feeling the pain, letting me know that I was going to be admitted to the hospital and I'd probably be there for a few days, and that they were just going to give me rounds of antibiotics. And then she was like, the worst thing that would happen is that the antibiotics don't work, and then she explained to me that they would end up having to cut out the infected part, and uh, they would end up having to cut the infected part out, and I would have to have what they call a colostomy, which is just they rework my intestines and attach a little bag onto my side, and that's how I eject, waste from my body, and that would be, temporary most likely. But she said that they will seek to avoid surgery at all cost. So that morning, Melissa ended up leaving, and I ended up getting admitted into the hospital. And it's really all of this. Oh, the worst thing that the doctor told me was that I was not allowed to eat or drink anything. So that was, I think, the most miserable. Well, I don't know. There was a lot of miserable parts. The pain was probably the most miserable, but next to that, not eating or drinking was awful. So I get admitted. No food, no liquid. They're just doing IVs and with antibiotics and painkillers. So the painkiller they ended up putting me on, just made me tired all the time. And so I slept a lot, those first couple days. In fact, I think Charles came and visited me. I mean, I know that he came and visited me. I don't entirely remember the visit. I think I was pretty out of it when he came and visited. But Charles, if you're watching this, thank you for coming and visiting me. Um, so the next few days kind of followed in that same pattern, and they were just pumping me full of antibiotics. So, Wednesday I still felt really bad. Thursday, Thursday I started to feel better, uh, and I think a lot of the reasons for that was by that point all the antibiotics and everything were really like kicking into my system, uh, and I just been bedridden for, I mean, almost 3 days at this point, because I was pretty much in bed nonstop Tuesday, and as well as Wednesday and Thursday. So I think that kind of fooled me into thinking that I was getting better. And then Friday rolled around, and by Friday I was really really bad, really bad. Ended up uh, blacking out at one point, which really scared the nurses, as well as Melissa. Uh, and then the pain quadrupled that day. So I was starting to have, I called them spasms. What it really felt like was that I was being stabbed with a knife in my lower abdomen. I mean, I'll have nightmares for that much pain that I was in, even on painkillers. And so the whole day I kept having these horrible spasm pain. So that by the evening, I mean, they were hitting me about every 5 to 10 minutes, and I was in so much misery at this point. And so I ended up texting Melissa, and I was like, I need you to call the hospital and I need better painkillers because I can't even rest. I'm in so much pain. And I think at this point, like, my nurse had come in, and I just I didn't yell at my nurse, but I was very, very like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, you guys have to do something different. And I just explained to her that, like, I need better painkillers, and I have to get out of bed to use the restroom. And I mean, I just told her that I needed this. So between Melissa calling, my mom ends up calling, and me, kind of forcefully speaking to my nurse. Thankfully, she calls the doctor on call, and the doctor ends up putting me back on morphine and just straight morphine all the time. So that night, I was actually able, thankfully, to sleep. And so I slept pretty good that night, as good as you can sleep in a hospital when they wake you up every 3 hours for changing IVs or IV things, and then of course I got woken up every single morning for them to draw blood every morning. Um, so uh, that morning I got woken up for them to draw blood, and then my nurse came in to give me my next dosage of IVs, antibiotics, and morphine, as well as some other pills that was supposed to help with the spasming. And I mean, at this point, I mean, I was in really, really bad shape at this point. So she ends up telling me that the doctor had ordered a CT scan that morning. So she ends up giving me all of my medicine, and I had vomited one time before in the hospital, and I mean, throwing up was horrible amounts of pain. And I ended up throwing up again that morning. And I mean, you can just imagine when you haven't had anything to eat and drink, what vomiting would feel like. It was miserable. And so, uh, I have just enough time because the transport people were there to text Melissa to say, "Hey, going for another CT scan." Threw up again, and that was all I text her. Well, she gets that text. She wasn't supposed to come visit me in the hospital. She was going to come later that afternoon and stay the night. And when she got my text, she had thought something way worse was happening. And so our boys, Bryce and Jaden, had a basketball game that morning that she was supposed to take them to. She gets a friend to take them. I go down, do the CT scan, and I could tell, even when I did the CT scan, I could tell that there was something much worse about my condition on Saturday than it was on, uh, I guess, Tuesday night. Because the pain that I was experiencing, I mean, this is when I was on morphine, uh, again. And so the pain that I was experiencing was so much more. It had traveled up my whole side, and to such a degree that I couldn't even move myself from my bed over to the CT table. And so they had to get the nurses to move me because I couldn't endure the pain of being moved. So we do the CT scan, transport people take me back up to um, my room, and Melissa's there. And she is livid, so mad at me, because by this point, I'm feeling okay. I mean, I'm looped out on morphine, so, um, and she's just livid with me because of my one text to her. And for everyone who texted me at the hospital, if I didn't get back to you or I was really delayed in getting back to you, I do apologize. It was really, really difficult between the pain and being looped out all the time. It was really hard to keep up with correspondence. And so I say that and ask your forgiveness and your understanding, which I'm sure that all of you guys understand. But so, long story short, Melissa's in the room, and probably 20 minutes pass by, and all of a sudden, my surgeon's in there. And she never came this early in the morning, ever. And so I immediately started to feel really nervous about it, and I just asked her. I said, what was the CT scan? And she just looks at Melissa and I and ends up telling us that it didn't look good at all. Um, and she said that you look like you're filling up with gas. I guess that's what the CT scan looks like. And so she looks at my stomach and she said that I looked extremely distended. And so she said, I've already ordered an emergency surgery for you. And she said, the transport people are already up here, and I'll see you down in the OR in a few minutes. And it was just like that. And so it was really, really scary. And so Melissa and I mean, we had just enough time to say it one prayer together, a quick prayer, and I was immediately being taken out. So I get brought down into the operating room, and I remember, one, trying to be brave, in this situation, even as Melissa and I are praying, um, but it was really hard. You're sitting here thinking, uh, I'd been sick for so many days now, and when a surgeon is nervous, or is wanting to do emergency surgery, there's some anxiety of whether or not, I was going to survive it, or whether I had gotten so bad that I wasn't going to live. And I remember just thinking through as I was going down there, tears are running down my eyes. I'm trying to fight them back and thinking through just my family and what would happen to them if I died, and preparing even my own heart for, all of this, and thinking through, that I really longed to be with the Lord, and how much better of a thing that would be. But there was also so many things that I still wanted to teach my children. And I kind of felt like, really the Apostle Paul, that, that, to die and be united with Christ would be far better. Um, but because of his work, he knew that he would live on. And so I was stuck in those, two things of just thinking that, man, to go and be with Christ would be far better. To die would be so much gain, but to live here and to be able to instruct my wife and my children in faith would be better for them. And so I don't even really remember. I remember them. So funny story was that, you go into this room where they first start prepping you for anesthesiology or anesthesia. And I remember the anesthesiologist wanted to do some sort of thing, some sort of pain blocker thing in my abdomen, that would help block the pain after surgery. I don't know what the whole deal was with this thing, but it's apparently a thing that he really, really, really seems to love to do. But my doctor hadn't ordered it. So he went and asked my doctor about it, and my doctor told him that she would do it during surgery, that was her preference. He came back, and this old doctor, this old anesthesiologist, was so upset, not like angry, just like, the times where you really, really want something and then find out you can't have it, and you're just kind of disgruntled about it. He was so disgruntled about not getting to do this. And I remember the nurse that was helping me was like, he really likes to do that. And so, like, most doctors let him do it. And anyways, it was really, really funny. But I remembered having to get my IV redone. And I remember her end up telling me that she was giving me something to relax. And I guess I just fell asleep because the next thing I woke up was after the surgery. Um, and I don't even really remember the rest of that day. They ended up having to put a tube down my nose into my belly to pump stomach acid because apparently I had started vomiting after surgery, and that was miserable, having that stinking cord down my throat. Um, and so finally I woke up and, just kind of heard everything that had happened to me. This is late in the evening on Saturday, I think. And Melissa just ended up telling me um, that I had been really bad. So when the doctor had gone into me to start performing the surgery, I was apparently just my intestines and everything were in horrible shape. She said that she had ended up having to have another surgeon come in and assist her. They ended up cutting out, I guess, like an 8-inch piece of my colon, and the hole that was in my colon ended up being a centimeter in diameter. And so it was a pretty decent hole, and so I'd been leaking sewage into my body. So I ended up being diagnosed with sepsis, as well as all of the 7 or 8 other diagnoses that I got diagnosed with. And so on the fantastic note is that I lived. In case any of you guys were on that cliffhanger of wondering what was going to happen to me, I did survive, thankfully. And they did end up having to cut pretty much from right below my sternum all the way down to my belt line. So because of the snow, unfortunately, I still have like 25 staples in my stomach. Um, and they ended up having to do what they call a colostomy, which I had shared earlier, is that they rework my intestines. And weirdly enough, is that they rework your intestines and it pokes out the side of your stomach, and then they attach this bag on, and I leak sewage out of the bag, which is really gross, really annoying, but a lot better. Well, in one aspect, I'm thankful to be alive. And so, anyways, the good note with it is that it's not permanent, and so the hope is that in 2 to 3 months, um, I'll go back into surgery. They'll cut me back open and they'll reattach my intestines back to my colon. And so that's really what's happened. And over the past few weeks, I've really just been in recovery. First week I really couldn't move very well. I had to do some walking, some PT, but for the most part, I was just in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and just slept a lot. And so slowly I'm recovering, getting a lot of mobility back. Um, I'm off all painkillers. Still hurts a little bit, but for the most part, I'm doing well, and looking forward to getting back into the normal course of life. And I just wanted to share with you guys really some of the things that I've learned from the whole situation. One is that God does care about our physical bodies, and I think this was something that I was really slow to learn. I really struggled for, mm, I mean, my entire life. I mean, when I was younger, it didn't really matter because I played soccer and I was just always moving. But I just learned really, really bad eating habits, specifically just overeating. Um, and I overate a lot. And I just really, I mean, it was something that Melissa had struggled with me, because it really bothered her about me being overweight. And she asked me so many times just to lose weight. She was so concerned about the health issues and stuff later on down the road. And I tried different things, different diets, and it was just, really, it was a sin, because that is what it was. Is that it was a sin that I wasn't really willing to die to myself. Wasn't really willing to crucify. Um, and I could throw out so many excuses as to why, but that's really what the reality was that I wasn't really willing to mortify this sin in my life. I liked eating too much, and unfortunately, like, I ate things that were bad for me a lot of times. I'd sit down and, like, white cheddar popcorn was my Achilles heel. And I would eat a huge dinner, and then I would sit down and eat literally a whole bag, almost a whole bag of white cheddar popcorn. And and so it was just one of those things where the Lord had warned me about it so many times, and I just didn't listen. Um, or I made these half efforts to deal with it rather than, and that's a good lesson for us is that, man, when you have to kill sin, you can't kill it half-heartedly. You can't be like, well, I'll get around to it, or I'll kill it a little bit here, a little bit there, and think that's sufficient. You have to full on attack these things, and you have to wrestle them to death. And that was one of the things that I just didn't listen. And I wanted to share with you guys just a little bit out of something I had read just out of my devotions right now. I've been going through Amos, and something that really hit me hard was in Amos chapter 4. Um, God is rebuking Israel and talks about how much he hates their religious sacrifices and all of these religious things that they do in the thought that they were worshiping him. And he goes on and he just shares how he was disciplined. And a lot of the discipline was really horrible things. And, just tells them, I did this, and I did this, and I did this. And this statement's repeated over and over again. And it says, yet you have not returned to me. In fact, it appears 5 different times in this one chapter in 13 verses. And so at the very end it says, I overthrew you as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, and you were like a firebrand snatched from a blaze. Yet you have not returned to me, declares the Lord. And then here we go. Therefore, thus I will do to you, O Israel, because I will do this to you. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. For behold, he who forms mountains and creates the wind and declares to man what are his thoughts, he who makes dawn into darkness and treads on high places of the earth, the Lord God of hosts is his name. And I thought about that as I, have really wanted to take the time, especially this healing time, to really draw near to the Lord, really think through what all God was teaching me in this situation. And one of the things that I read when I read that, or thought when I read that, was just that I don't want to be like Israel. And I see in myself so many things that are like Israel. I mean, so many idols that I constantly turn to, things that God rebukes me of that I turn back to. And I thought about that, especially in this area of gluttony, that I don't want to be like Israel. I don't want to be like the kind of people where the Lord has done all of these things. And this was I really do believe this is a discipline that was really hard to go through, very painful, um, that the Lord was like, wake up and see your need for repentance. And and I just don't want to be the kind of person that doesn't learn my lesson like Israel. I don't want to I don't want to have to prepare myself to meet the judge in the way that Israel was going to have to meet the judge. I want to learn my lessons with humility and a humble and contrite heart, and to tremble. And so it's one of the things that I've been praying a lot about, is that the Lord would really help me, that this really would have been the cure for me to see the discipline and the need to mortify gluttony in my life. And so I want to encourage you, if you guys are struggling with that sin as well, man, you've got to mortify it because, I mean, I think about my situation. Like, I'm 32 years old, never had any history of, that I know of at least, any history of any sort of abdominal intestine issues at all. Like, I had nothing. And then I nearly die in the hospital. And so, it's just one of those things where I really do believe that this was a discipline of the Lord, a gracious and merciful discipline of the Lord, and one that I feel like the Lord really used to wake me up, open my eyes to this sin in my life, and to work repentance in. And so, I want to encourage you that if you're struggling with this, you need to see it, because there are consequences. Every choice that we make, especially sinful choices, have consequences to them, and we need to see that for what it really is. We need to see sin for what it really is, and we need to seek the Lord. And that's one of the things that really happens in that next chapter of Amos, in chapter 5. The Lord says in verse 4, "Seek me that you may live." He goes on in verse 6, says, "Seek the Lord that you may live." And it's something else. In verse 12, he says, "For I know your transgressions are many, and your sins are great." The Lord knows everything. There's nothing that we're hiding from him. And then he says in verse 14, "Seek good and not evil, that you may live. And thus may the Lord of God of hosts be with you." That's what I want. I want the Lord of God of hosts to be with me. And I want to seek his face. And I don't want to do evil. I want to seek good. And so this was a sin in my life that I had to go through a severe discipline in order to see. And I pray that the Lord would be gracious and continue to help me to mortify the sin in my life, and that uh, the Lord would be gracious for me to lose weight and to eat healthy, and hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months to have my body put back together where it's working normal and everything. But I just wanted to take this time to brief you guys. I plan on being there this Sunday to preach. So it'd be good to be back in the pulpit and be back with you guys. And I just want to thank you so much for your encouragement. And I pray that you guys will be safe tonight and try to stay warm. I know that I've been freezing all day. So you guys try to stay warm and have a blessed night.